Yeah, I am back to talk about Valentine's Day. I am spreading the love today. I'm hoping that Dave, Amy, and Heath are also feeling the love. It is Valentine's Day Eve, Thursday, February 13th, and we're giving you our fantasy Valentines, players that we love right now in the early process. I'm also going to go through some news and notes as the Saints have a new head coach, Deebo Samuel. We haven't even talked about Deebo Samuel and the trades, although I may have been mentioned on yesterday's show and the Jets situation and all that, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Like all of it. I listened to a little bit of the show. I didn't get through the whole thing. All right. So we won't talk about that so much. But did you get to Kellen Moore? Did that come out before the show?
Yep.
And how'd that conversation go?
It was more centered around Kamara, but it was discussed. You can go more if you want.
No, that's all right. So we'll get into Valentine's. We welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I had a note here. Ask Jamie how much of the news and notes he got to yesterday, and I totally skipped over that until just now and realized that in the middle of my intro. But thank you guys for filling in yesterday. I do appreciate it. So anyway, Dave, you'd be proud of me.
I would. Really?
I want to brag about something here. Ate 6 slices of pizza at dinner last night with a little bit of 2 appetizers and dessert.
What was the dessert?
What's it called? Tartufo or something, you know?
Oh, all right. Not your Greek yogurt with warmed fruit.
No, I was out to dinner.
All right. That's pretty bold of you.
Yeah.
I am mildly impressed.
Where'd Jamie go? What's up, Heath?
I'm going to try really hard to get into a better mood. It's Grumpy Heath on Valentine's Day Eve. I received it's been a lot of things. You know, you ever have just like a streak of like people just keep kind of irritating you and things keep irritating you. And the straw that broke the camel's back was my HOA sending me a letter telling me that my mailbox was too short.
What?
I moved into this house 10 years ago. It had the same mailbox. I've lived here for 10 years. The mailbox has not shrunk. And now it's too short, so I have to go buy a new mailbox.
You know, shrinking mailboxes happen to a lot of houses, Heath.
Yeah.
I think it's probably the mailman who's complaining.
I'm really tempted to just like pull it out of the ground a little bit.
Yeah.
And like so the concrete shows. But
how much taller does it need to be?
I'm trying to figure that out because oddly enough, there's no guidance on that in the letter.
You could give it some growth hormones.
Yes.
You should just tell them that you fixed it and then don't fix it.
I was thinking about just putting a pole on top of it.
Insert mail below. Well, I'm sorry, Heath.
You should put like a ruler next to it just to like make a point.
I was thinking about just walking around the neighborhood for the day with a yardstick, measuring everyone's mailbox and making notes on a piece of paper. But I'm not actually.
Then you're doing
this
HOA's job for them.
I don't care at all. I just get irritable about it.
You know, it's very strange. Yeah, I've never heard of this complaint before. But look, talking about players you love might help. So we will get into some fantasy Valentines.
Gotta get us back on track there.
Yeah, there we go. Actually, you know what? I was gonna have Jamie go first, but I think Heath, you should go first with your fantasy Valentines.
Yeah. You know, I thought I threw in a little bit of from last year to this year, but my 3 fantasy Valentines are Chuba Hubbard, Jauan Jennings, and Trey McBride. And Hubbard was the guy last year that we tried to replace with Jonathan Brooks. I don't know how many times this offseason we said, Hubbard's going to be great until Jonathan Brooks comes off of PUP, and then Jonathan Brooks is going to be even better. Well, Hubbard was better than we could have imagined. And when I went through my 2025 projections process, something we talked about quite a bit yesterday, I was surprised that Hubbard came out as a top 12 running back for the 2025 season. And that's with me not expecting Brooks is going to play. And really, with what he did last year and what he's done the last 2 years when he's been given the opportunity, I don't know why we would expect anything else. I did draft him in our mock draft, maybe round 4 or 5 as my number 1 running back. Absolutely loved that value. Number 2, McBride. He's partially my Valentine because he was so good last year and was my most drafted tight end, but also because, again, I think you can make a really good case for Brock Bowers as a top 12 pick and Trey McBride as a top 18 pick. just with difference in value that they're going to provide over the rest of the position, which is absolutely hot garbage. And I would expect that McBride is actually going to be a little bit better on a per game basis next year than he was last past year, because the touchdown luck, and I know he didn't score that many touchdowns the year before either. He may not ever be a 10 touchdown guy, but he's certainly not going to be as unlucky as he was last year in terms of touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised if he scores 5 or 6, which gets him into that 16 fantasy point per game range. And Jauan Jennings is currently my favorite 49ers wide receiver in drafts.
Jennings is really interesting, and he went in round 7 in the mock draft from a couple of days ago, and he went after Brandon Ayuk, went after Jerry Jeudy, went after Ridley, went after Cooper Kupp. So you got right in the middle of round 7, Jauan Jennings being drafted. And things looked great for Jauan Jennings. I mean, he looked like a guy that was just stepping in. And remember, week 3, I think Debo was out in week 3. He had 11 catches for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns on 12 targets at the Rams.
Kittle was also out that game.
Kittle was also out. Okay. Down the stretch, though, I mean, Jennings really was, I think, pretty disappointing down the stretch. Look at, I'll take out week 18. He had 7 catches for 52 yards on 10 targets in a half. Then he got ejected, but that was with Josh Dobbs. But you look at, like, let's say weeks 12 through week 17, he was over 67 yards only once in those 6 games. He was over 56 yards only twice in those 6 games. I wonder what happened there. Because like before that, he had 93 yards, 91 yards. I don't know. He kind of slumped down the stretch. I just remember being really, really high on him. And then 9 points, 8.6 points, 28 points, 5.1, 9.1, 13.7. And the 13.7 actually came, like, some of it was late in that week 17 game against Detroit, which decided a lot of championships, when Purdy got hurt on the last drive. And then Josh Dobbs came in. Josh Dobbs loves Jauan Jennings. I'm just saying there wasn't a great Purdy to Jauan Jennings chemistry. Now, I drafted him yesterday, so I obviously like him. But I don't know what happened there at the end, Heath. Sorry, that was a ramble.
No, I just think that, like, he played at least 70% of the snaps in 9 games last year. In those 9 games, he had 56 catches for 694 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's like a top 5 fantasy wide receiver.
Yeah.
It sounds good when you put it that way, but you've got to understand that, like, he had 46.5 PPR points in 1 game without Kittle and without Debo. And so that makes me a little bit nervous. He averaged 12.2 PPR points per game after that game all the way through the end of the season. And I wonder if that's the average that's probably more representative of expectations. I don't know what your per game PPR average is in your projections, Heath, but I wonder if 12.2 is kind of what we should think about for Jauan Jennings. Maybe a little bit better than that, because he'll be a full-time player moving forward. But I don't know if he's – I think we really have to just kind of – well, I don't want to say throw out that game against – I
think if we're going to throw out his best game, we should probably throw out his worst. Like,
I'd be interested. You're still not going to get an amazing average. Like,
I'd be interested in looking at the fantasy points per game average of every player if you throw out their best game.
But but here's the thing. It's one thing to throw out their best game. It's another thing to throw out their best game if it happened to come without Debo Samuel and George Kittle.
Well, I think there's a good chance he's going to be playing the beginning of next year without Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, does Ayuk – what does Ayuk do to Jauan Jennings, right? Because that game, that week 3 game, that huge game that he had, 46.5 fantasy points, Ayuk did play in that game. By the way, he also so he had 4 big games. He had 4 games with 90 or more yards, and 3 of those games he had at least 1 touchdown. I guess I'd say he had 3 like huge games. Kittle missed 2 of those huge games for Jennings. Debo missed 1 of them. Ayuk missed 2 of them. So that's always the thing with San Francisco, is we're always sitting here calculating without these guys, and the guys get hurt every year, and Debo's going to probably get traded. Also, McCaffrey didn't play all but 3 games last year, 2.5 games. So, I don't want to just say, oh, we're taking away his best game. I think we're recognizing that Jauan Jennings did a lot of his best work without George Kittle on the field. I think that's kind of the point here.
Well, I think just looking at the situation here, you're going to get one of the top receivers on one of the top offenses at a pretty good cost. And we talked about this yesterday, that, you know, the way that this draft unfolded, it was Brandon Ayuk at the start of round 7, Jennings in the middle of round 7, and then Ricky Pearsall went in round
9.
And so Heath and I think both agreed on this. I don't know where Dave came out on it, but like we both said that we're going to get a lot or try and get a lot of Jennings and Pearsall, while other people are maybe chasing Ayuk still because of hopefully he's back ready to go. But just looking at injured receiver and just the cost of these other guys where they should end up.
Agreed.
And Kittle was in round 5. So he went.
That's going to be your first 49ers pass catcher to go off the board.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Heath has Chuba Hubbard, who went in round 4. Jauan Jennings went in round 7, we just mentioned. And Trey McBride, who went in round 2. 3 picks after Brock Bowers. All right, Heath, I also know another thing you love. That would be FFT Dynasty. New episode tomorrow. Give us a little promo.
Yeah, let's talk about what we talked about earlier this week. We had Dan on Tuesday. We discussed some rankings, risers and fallers. We've got Dynasty rankings coming up in the future. We've got a lot of emails, so keep sending your emails in because there's another mailbag coming very soon. And we will get a rookie mock. We've got some. I've got some feelers out to some other Dynasty analysts around the industry to talk about this rookie class for the first time on the show.
Excellent. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about some young wide receivers on Jamie's Valentine's Day list. And I've already broken up with one of my Valentines. We'll find out about that and also hear from Dave. And we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Are you guys doing anything for Valentine's Day? Buying flowers? It's pretty much not a holiday for me.
Oh, look, what a lucky wife you've got.
I guess I might get her something, but I don't know. Jamie said no.
This is the reason you think his wife's unlucky?
That's not nice. Oh, man, I don't like grumpy Heath. I'm a very good husband. Yeah, I don't know.
No.
Thank you.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I mean, we're going to go out to a nice dinner.
You are?
She's going to watch me drink tequila and eat her bone-in ribeye.
What a lucky lady. All right, Jamie, who's on your Valentine's Day list?
Well, I guess you teased the young receiver. So Romeo Doubs and Jalen McMillan would be the 2 young receivers. I also have a young running back in Isaac Guerendo, but we'll start with Odunze because it's easy to just make the case for him, assuming Keenan Allen's gone. But even if Allen's there, the opportunity that he has now, year 2 with Ben Johnson, now the play caller, hopefully better offensive line, a better Caleb Williams. I was very excited to draft him yesterday. I think it was in round 7, if I'm not mistaken, for Odunze. So let me confirm that.
Yeah, round 6. Just before all those wide receivers, Ayuk and Judy, Ridley, Kupp, Jennings, you took Odunze.
Yep. So just looking at the upside again, was drafted to be a premier talent, possibly their heir apparent to the number 1 receiver as soon as DJ Moore maybe hangs things up or moves on. But should be hopefully a 1 and 1A situation of Moore and Odunze. And, if you're just looking at the, Lions offense going to Chicago, hopefully he could be the Jameson Williams. I think he'll be a little bit different. He's not as fast. He's not as explosive, but he has a chance to be, an explosive type of player. And so just a huge opportunity in front of him, especially again, if Keenan Allen is gone. Then you look at Jalen McMillan, as we saw at the end of last season, with no Chris Godwin, has an opportunity. I guess I like the Washington receivers, but McMillan and his role when Godwin was not there and he was finally healthy, just became a touchdown magnet for Baker Mayfield. And I think there's more that he has to offer as well. So we have a situation here. If Godwin's back, I'm not going to be as excited as about McMillan, but if Godwin's gone, this guy's got the potential to be a top 30 receiver going into the year and maybe a top 20 receiver by the end of the season, especially if Mike Evans, who will be 32, misses time again. That was the opportunity that I thought initially when we saw that week 7 situation when both Evans and Godwin went down. I thought, okay, this is the time that Jalen McMillan could step up. He suffered injuries himself, but he closed the season as an absolute monster, and hopefully that carries over to year 2. And then in terms of Isaac Guerendo, I'm curious to see how the 49ers will treat their entire backfield. They almost always draft a guy on day 3 to add to their to supplement their backfield there. But Isaac Guerendo, I think, in my opinion, will be better than Jordan Mason, assuming Mason comes back. He's a restricted free agent. But the guys behind McCaffrey, I think, Adam, you did this in the draft. You drafted Jordan Mason and Guerendo. It's something I've done quite a bit in our mock draft so far. Just taking a chance on both those guys. We'll see how it shakes out now. Hopefully get a little bit more clarity by the time we get to August. But I think Guerendo will end up being the backup to McCaffrey. And for what we saw this year from McCaffrey, and the spurts for Guerendo, an explosive running back. Hopefully, he'll do a little bit more in the passing game than he showed last year. But I think he could be a potential league winner again if McCaffrey misses any time.
What rounds did they go in? Mason and Guerendo?
Mason went in round 9, Guerendo in round 11.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's good.
Thank you.
Easy dart throws late in the draft for high upside running backs behind one of the most interesting players that we'll take this year. And Guerendo averaged it. He had 4 games this year where he played 50% of the snaps or more. He averaged almost 18 PPR points in those games, had 3.5 targets per game.
Yeah.
The only downside to Guerendo, and dynasty leaguers, cover your ears, he's 25. So short of that, he's somebody that absolutely fits into that offense and could be pretty good if something were to happen to McCaffrey.
They did not throw to Jordan Mason. He never had more than 3 targets in a game. He usually had 1 or 2. Guerendo, they were more willing to throw to. By the way, McCaffrey, man. Whew. 3rd pick of the 2nd round, Thomas Schaefer. Steal of the draft. Well done. All right, there you go. I just wrote an article. Best pick of the draft was McCaffrey. I want to talk about Odunze here. And I think I gave this stat probably when they hired Ben Johnson. Yards per route run. Do we kind of feel, is that the best stat to evaluate wide receivers? You don't really see great, like if you look at the leaders in yards per route run, I mean, it is the studs. Does anybody feel that way? Like if you were going to look at one stat for wide receivers, yards per route run might be the one. I would say if I were going to be one, it would be that.
You are comparing full-time players to full-time players. I would say that's fine.
Yeah. I always try to do like 50 or more targets for a season. So
I'd probably want more than that.
Fair. Over the last 10 seasons, Romeo Doubs, he averaged 1.18 yards per route run. That ranks 84th out of 96 rookies who had 50 or more targets over the last 10 seasons. He was horrible on a per route basis. None of the players who averaged less than 1.8 yards per route run ended up being great. The only one that was even close was Sterling Shepard. Now, Quentin Johnston is also on this list. I guess the future we don't know, but I mean, he was awful on a per route basis. The reason I don't care is because Keenan Allen and DJ Moore both had the lowest yards per route run of their careers. So that's how bad the Bears passing game was. So I think that they all need perspective. They had really bad years in terms of yards per route run. Career lows for DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Obviously, career low for Romeo Doubs, but he was horrible. But how willing are you guys to overlook what was honestly a pretty bad rookie year for Romeo Doubs?
Very willing to overlook it.
Round 5 willing?
No, but I don't have to take him that early. If somebody does, then let them have him.
Okay. But I mean, I'm just trying to get a beat on what would be the round that you'd get him.
No. I mean, I took him in round 6, just looking at the receivers that were in front of him and behind him. So it was after Keon Coleman, which you can make a case was probably too soon. Jaden Reed, Devontae Adams, those are the guys that went in round 6. And I took him ahead of Ayuk. I took Judy again. So they'll probably be somewhat comparable. Calvin Ridley. Like, this is the range. If you're taking somebody based on upside, I think you have to sort of pull the trigger.
It's funny you bring up Jaden Reed because Jaden Reed is a stud in yards per route run. I just want to, over the last 2 years, Jaden Reed's career, and this is a little bit of a tangent. Jaden Reed's career, let me read over the last 2 years, the top 15 players in yards per route run, wide receivers with 50 or more targets over the last 2 years. I mean, you can forget about the targets. It's a lot. This is the list. Nico Collins, Puka Nacua, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Jefferson, Ayuk, Lamb, Rashee Rice, St. Brown, Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey, Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, Malik Nabers. Jaden Reed is 15. He's right behind that list. And then it's like Jaden Reed, Drake London, George Pickens, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle. So it's weird. Jaden Reed is the beginning of the non-studs. The 14 guys ahead of him in yards per route run over the last 2 seasons are all studs, basically.
What did you say Romeo Doubs was last year?
1.18.
Okay.
Like
So
Nico Collins had a
little worse than Jaxon Smith-Njigba.
And Nico Collins was like 1.21 or something like that. But It took until year 3 to break out. So this is not a death sentence, but it's bad.
Like, I think it's important when you're looking at stats like that to say who was not necessarily who was worse, but who was in his range. Like, however you want to define the range, within 10 points, within 15 points. Because if you've got Nico Collins and Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the neighborhood, then that makes it sound a lot better than no one was good who was worse than him.
I don't know. See, I don't even know the answer to this, but Jaxon Smith-Njigba averaged 1.32 yards per route run as a rookie, and Romeo Doubs averaged 1.18. Is that in the neighborhood, or is that a big gap? I'm not really sure.
Depends. What does the HOA say?
I would say it's definitely. It depends, like who's measuring, but I would say it's 100% in the neighborhood. Yes.
All right, we're gonna get some more Valentines. We had Odunze, McMillan, and Isaac Guerendo. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, now's the time to do this with the promo code FANTASY, and you're going to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app, and you sign up and use the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. All right, Dave, who are you having tequila and steak with in fantasy football?
Oh, how nice. Malik Nabers headlines the list for me, along with the aforementioned Jaxon Smith-Njigba and DJ Moore. And we talked a lot about DJ Moore yesterday, Adam. You weren't around. We can rehash that if you want to, but I'm optimistic that he can keep up the type of volume that we saw last season, hopefully with a better ADOT, and that'll just lead to better fantasy production. As much fun and as much upside as Odunze has, I still think DJ Moore should go ahead of him in drafts at this point. Nabers led the NFL in targets per game last year. And something that stood out to me was that only 19% of his targets were uncatchable. You think about how terrible those quarterbacks were, and yet still not even 20% of the targets were uncatchable. That's a little startling, and that might make people say, well, so he can't be better than he was last year. Well, who cares? He averaged 18.2 PPR points per game last year. The only thing that could slow him down is if the Giants make a huge splash at wide receiver and they don't do bupkis at quarterback and they bring back DeVito and whatever, and that just waters down the type of targets per game that Malik Nabers gets. I think Nabers is a first-round pick. I don't think that that's crazy. Might even be top half of first-round good in full PPR. And then with JSN, he averaged 1.8 yards per route run. Adam, I thought you'd be interested in that. But more importantly, from week 8 on, once DK Metcalf got hurt, 17.7 PPR points per game. In 8 games when he saw at least 7 targets and DK Metcalf played, so those two qualifiers, 7 targets or more, DK Metcalf on the field, he averaged 18 PPR points per game. In 10 games with 7 or more targets, regardless of who was on the field, Jaxon Smith-Njigba averaged 19.3 PPR points per game. I think we're getting an offensive coordinator upgrade with Clint Kubiak going to Seattle. He'll be in charge. I don't love that it's still going to be Geno Smith at quarterback, but I do think that Tyler Lockett's days are numbered there. I'm hoping they do not make a big splash at wide receiver to replace Tyler Lockett, and JSN finally ascends to being the number 1 guy in the Seattle passing game. He will most likely open up in my rankings as a top 15 receiver in full PPR, significantly lower in half and non-PPR, but somebody who could absolutely crush week after week.
Smith-Njigba was only wide receiver 22 per game, which was surprising in the, I want to say 8 games. 8 games after DK Metcalf returned, last 8 games of the season. He had 2 horrible games to finish the year where he scored 6.2 fantasy points at Chicago and 5.3 fantasy points at the Rams. Before that, he was probably a top 5 receiver. That's like how bad those 2 games were. In fact, I'll tell you right now. So JSN, you took him as wide receiver 20, 41st overall in the draft that we just did.
Loved it. Yep.
Yeah. So
I almost took him in round 3. I was thrilled when he made it back to me in round 4.
Okay, he was like 9th per game from weeks 11 through 16, and then he stunk in the last 2 games. I'm not sure what that was all about. DJ Moore went 4 picks after JSN. Who do you guys like better, JSN or DJ Moore?
JSN.
DJ Moore. I'm a little bit concerned by this run the ball or run the damn ball, they may have said, mentality in Seattle. Like, I think we're going to get a significant reduction in total pass attempts for them next year. I still like JS, like round 4 as wide receiver 20, love it. But I'm not sure. It might be more efficiency from JSN, but a lot less volume.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think do you remember, Jamie, if he made any top 12s? He was one of those guys that was right there for me. I can't remember if he was 12th or not. I think he just missed the cut.
I'll check.
But I think probably some people considered him at least for a top 12 wide receiver, just right at the end.
And to be fair for Heath,
he was 13th.
Seattle was 5th in pass rate last year, 63%. First year without Pete Carroll there. I don't think it was ever that high in any of the years Pete Carroll coached the Seahawks.
Yeah, I'll probably talk about this 1,000 times between now and August, but 78% slot rate, 77%, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think that's changing.
Ludicrous. I don't know that we've had a top 12. No, it doesn't happen. It's just too high. So that would probably cap his upside, but let's get him outside a little bit more. That'd be, even if we were like 70%, that'd be great. All right. So for Jamie, or for Heath, we started with Heath. Chuba Hubbard, Jauan Jennings, and Trey McBride. For Jamie, Odunze, McMillan, and Guerendo. For Dave, Malik Nabers, Jaxon, Smith-Njigba, and DJ Moore.
JSN did not make anybody's top 12.
Okay. He was the guy who just missed the cut for me. But might have to reevaluate. I don't know. All right. So who are my Valentines? I already broke up with one of them. Find out who after this on FFT.
Baby, we are gonna start a fire.
From world-renowned clubs
Simply devastating.
to worldwide stars,
Wrexham have done it. This incredible ride continues.
the English Football League on CBS Sports Network, and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back. You know, someone asked me, what are you doing this weekend? I was like, I don't have any football to watch. What the heck am I going to do? It's very strange.
Seriously.
It's so sad. Are there other football leagues that are starting?
Yeah, the UFL will start up soon.
Just watch SEC basketball. You'll be happy.
Oh, yeah. It's not going to happen. I started watching Love on Netflix. It's like 5 years old. It's pretty good. Anybody seen that one?
No.
Love? I have.
Judd Apatow? It's good. What's going on, guys? I missed you.
Just so, again, we're clear. You're watching a show called Love, and you still haven't seen The Sopranos.
I was thinking of starting. It's such a commitment. Like, that's months, probably.
It'd be worth it for you.
Yeah, I figured. How's everybody doing? How's everybody feeling? No one wants to talk. No one wants to just.
I think I pretty much ate my feelings earlier on the show. I think it's somebody else's turn.
All right, I have a question, Heath.
Yeah.
Which holiday are you more likely to celebrate? Valentine's Day or Halloween?
See, I think like you get right. Neither one of them are actually a holiday, but you get my Halloween thing wrong. Like, I still celebrate.
No.
I just don't pass out candy.
It's very selfish celebrating, I'd say.
I know, because I don't want to celebrate at all. But my wife asks me to dress up and go to a party. I do that. And we've passed out candy before, but it's a terrible holiday.
You know what you should do with the candy? You should put it in your mailbox. See if anybody even sees it.
It'd be it'd be
good for kids. It's short.
Tight for the kids because it's so short.
All right, my Valentines: Josh Jacobs and Chase Brown, and I had Romeo Doubs on here, but I broke up with him. But let's start with the running backs. Jacobs went in the second round. I just feel like he's pretty safe. He was the number 6 running back per game last year. He only had 36 catches, but the Packers were actually the third most run-heavy team. They had the third fewest pass attempts in the NFL last year, ahead of Philadelphia and Baltimore. So I think they'll probably throw more. Either way, I mean, he's just their guy. I like Marshawn Lloyd, but it was a nothing rookie season. He doesn't really seem to have any major competition. So I think that you're going to talk about a top 10 offense. They're usually around 10th in scoring. They've had only 1 year where they've been elite in scoring. They were 8th this past year. And you've got a workhorse running back. He's pretty safe. And he was RB8, 21st overall in yesterday's draft. So Josh Jacobs is a Valentine of mine. I really like the Packers offense, and there's a lot of opportunity, which is why I originally had Romeo Doubs, but then I broke up with him. But go to Chase Brown here. I mean, the Cincinnati offense, in the first 8 games of the year before Zach Moss got hurt, They averaged 23.3 points per game. That was 12th best in that stretch. They were 13th in yards per play. After Zach Moss got hurt and Chase Brown took over, I'm not saying this is the only reason, but after the Zach Moss injury, they averaged 30.5 points per game. They averaged a full touchdown more per game on offense, not including any defensive scores. And they averaged 6 yards per play, which was 6th best in the NFL. They were so much better as soon as they made Chase Brown their lead running back. From weeks 9 through 17, he was RB5 per game in half PPR, RB3 per game in full PPR. And that was with only 6 rushing touchdowns, or only 3 rushing touchdowns, on pace for 6 rushing touchdowns, but also on pace for 6 receiving touchdowns, which is a little bit fluky. But anyway, you know how I felt about Joe Mixon. I never thought he was all that great with the Bengals, but he always finished as a top 12 running back per game. And I don't see any reason why Chase Brown wouldn't. He went in the 3rd round of this draft. I consider taking him in the 1st round. I think that's probably a mistake. They'll add somebody, but I don't think they need to add anybody significant. He's proven himself. And then there's Romeo Doubs. And the point here is that I'm going to fall in love with some Packers pass catcher. I thought it'd be Doubs, but because he goes kind of late. Like, obviously, I'd rather have Jaden Reed. But he goes late. Romeo Doubs, round did he go in? I think like the 12th round in the draft we did yesterday. Yeah, I took him with the 7th pick of the 12th round. I think he's fine there, but just looking at his game log, looking at his stats, he's just not that good. It's just that simple. I think Wicks is probably better if he could catch the ball. I just don't see a ceiling for Doubs.
Wicks is probably better if he could catch the ball.
Yeah, I like Wicks is explosive. Yes. Doubs is not. Somebody's my Valentine might be Tucker Kraft. I've talked about this. Like his per route data is great, but I always love Christian Watson. I don't expect much of anything from Watson next year. Someone's going to step up. Doubs, I think Doubs has a ceiling as like
someone's going to step up and take the 55 targets that they're not. Matt LaFleur hates the idea of a number 1 wide receiver, and if they actually have a number 1 wide receiver this year, it'll be because they go get one.
Then I'll love that guy.
Yeah.
What if it's Devontae Adams?
The real interesting question with Josh Jacobs, and I think it directly relates to Jordan Love and maybe the Packers pass catchers. 2 years ago, when Jordan Love was so good for fantasy, they scored 42 touchdowns, 32 of them in the air, 10 of them on the ground. Last year, they actually scored 51 touchdowns. Jordan Love was worse because they had 23 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Just the way that they and Jacob Gibbs talked about this a lot going into last year. They'd been a very pass heavy team in the red zone and really just kind of flipped that.
Yeah, well, they have no passing game. Yeah, so I mean, they definitely
they had the same players.
You wonder how much the Jordan Love's injuries play a role in this. You know, once he got hurt and the run game got going, and they were having success winning that way. Like, did they need to switch back to maybe a little bit more balance or a little bit more pass heavy situation? Like, at what point was he finally back to himself, and then just was Josh Jacobs rolling enough that they didn't need to change anything?
Wasn't Jacobs that just said they need to get a number 1 wide receiver?
Yeah,
we made the joke yesterday that he's the new general manager.
Right. I think the whole reason why they got Josh Jacobs was so that they could run it in the red zone.
Yeah. Well, look, here's the thing about Jacobs. I mean, based on last year, you could make the case that he's a 1st-round pick, but I wouldn't do that. I just think he's a very solid, safe 2nd-round pick. He went late in the 2nd round. I think that's a perfect spot for him. I don't see a lot of downside with Josh Jacobs. I see your point, Heath, about not liking a Packers wide receiver, but the cost is pretty low. Doubs in the 12th round. Reed went in the 6th round, which I think might be early, but I know he's good. They just have to get him on the field more. You know, he needs to play more. That I would like for them to commit to maybe playing him on the outside a little bit more. So he's interesting. I think Wicks Wicks went before Doubs. I think whatever.
I just think we had this talk with the Chiefs a couple of years ago and yard per route run data, and how useful is that if they just only play the guys when they're going to throw the ball to them, or if they only use them on the 3 or 4 types of routes that they're actually good at and they're not full-time players. I think if Jaden Reed played 85% of the snaps, 90% of the snaps, he probably wouldn't be on the yards per route run leaderboard.
Yep. I don't know. I mean, he's very talented, you know, and he makes big plays, but it's possible. It's not like what does he play usually? What's his snap?
I think he's like in that 55 to 65% range. I'll look it up right now.
All right. Yeah, I'm not saying he'd keep up that kind of efficiency, but he's obviously an explosive player.
In his 3 playoff games the last 2 years, 48%, 61%, 55%.
No, I'm way. No, I'm looking at the wrong thing.
He had a couple 70s last year, but a lot of 50s.
Okay, so what about Tucker Kraft then? Can be no beef with Tucker Kraft. He was second among 31 tight ends with 50 or more targets and yards per target, 9.1 yards after the catch per reception. That's insane. With a low ADOT, but still very good. And yeah, he's a guy that I think is if tight end's so bad, if you don't get one of the top two, if I were drafting right now, my strategy would probably be just wait for Tucker Kraft.
You sound like me from Wednesday's show. It's exactly what I ended up doing in the draft that we just finished earlier this week. 5 games for Jayden Reed where he played 70% of the snaps or more. Another 3 games after that with 60% or more.
Okay.
I would say Tucker Kraft, if you can get him in the double-digit rounds and you're happy with 10 fantasy points per game, that's like
That's a starting fantasy tight end.
Do we have any reason to believe that his he's not probably going to be somebody that we draft him late and he turns into a top 5 tight end? I wouldn't think.
Yeah, unless he just has 8 touchdowns or something. But yeah, well, he had 7 last year, so it's going to need more than that.
Yeah, it's some of it's based on coach speak right now and how immediately after the season, LaFleur was talking him up as somebody who could be their version of Kittle or Kelsey in the offense. That seems like a stretch. But I think he could do a little bit better than 10 points per game, maybe like 10.5, maybe touches 11, because he's got a role that should be on the field all the time. I think he's their number 1 tight end. I think he proved that last year. And he was pretty close to it last year, 9.6.
But like yesterday's draft, we got George Kittle in round 5 and Njoku in round 8.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have those guys, sure.
Right.
But if I miss on them, the whole point isn't to target Tucker Kraft. He's the fallback option.
He's this year's Jake Ferguson.
He's this year's Jake Ferguson. Hopefully not with Jake Ferguson's production.
By the way, Kittle, I mean, with the state of the 49ers wide receivers, Ayuk coming off a torn knee and Debo on his way out, maybe Kittle should be around 3 pick or something like that. I don't know that he'll ever get that high, but yeah. How many tight ends had more than 8 touchdown catches last year?
Andrews and Kittle.
Half right. Andrews and Andrews. Just Mark Andrews. Kittle had 8. Jonnu had 8. Andrews had 11. And that was it. All right. Anything else, guys?
I think we covered the Packers.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to hear some Devontae Adams stats?
They're very Valentine's heavy, though. Love, Romeo,
People, crafting like Valentine's Day things.
I was thinking more of cheese being a delicious romantic food.
The last 11 games of the year for the
best
New
thing
York
you said
Jets.
was if Wicks could catch, he'd be great.
Last 11 games for the Jets after the Devontae Adams trade. Devontae Adams was on pace for 176 targets. Garrett Wilson, 134 targets. Devontae Adams was on pace for 104 catches, 1,320 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson, 93 catches, 1,090 yards, 6 touchdowns. Wilson had 11 red zone targets. Adams had 21. Wilson had 5 green zone targets. Adams had 13. Wilson had 7 end zone targets. Adams had 13 end zone targets. I just thought it was interesting with Rodgers on the way out, maybe Adams on the way out. But if they end up together, those two, you're going to get a lot of targets for Devontae Adams.
Well, is Rodgers on the way out, or is he just going to the other side of the building?
They don't. Oh, you mean the stadium that they play in? Yeah.
Oh, you think he's going to the Giants?
That's what Dan said on FFT Dynasty. He's hoping for it.
Yeah, whatever.
And they can bring Devontae Adams in, and Malik Nabers can have 112 targets next year.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
Just something to think about. Also, if you go look at Aaron Rodgers 2022 and 2024, his numbers are almost identical. It's last year with the Packers and this year with the Jets. Just very eerily similar. And that's it for me. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Dave, Heath, Jamie, hope you have a wonderful weekend. We will talk to you all on Monday. Make sure you check out Fantasy Football Today Dynasty, and we're about to do FFT Express, so we'll see you there. Have a good weekend, everybody. We love you.